Welcome to Nerds on Hip Hop. This podcast is about the intersection of hip hop and nerd life. Homeboy Sandman, Booster Gold, Alchemist are all fair game. And if you know any of these names, welcome.
There are four main parts. We first review our weeks in nerddom and hip-hopdom. Then we explore a theme through our hip-hop and nerd influences. At the end, we ask ourselves a question and open up to your questions.
Welcome officially to Nerds on Hip Hop. I'm the Wolves Den, and I'm joined by the great co-host,
Miss Old School, aka Victoria, or the other way around.
the oldest of schools.
Yes, I am.
So let us join in. What was our week in nerddom like? So, for me, as of this recording today, DC has just relaunched Wonder Woman for the probably 50 billionth time. But this is after their major event called DC Rebirth. And I read the comic today, and it was really interesting. So, for those who don't know anything about DC Rebirth, very shortly, 5 years ago, DC rebooted their entire line, where pretty much all the characters started over from scratch. Comic fans got a little bit upset with the idea that their 50 years of comic reading is kind of erased from history. So DC Rebirth was an event for them to kind of figure out a way to pull that history into their reboot. And Wonder Woman is actually a perfect character who has that problem. The entire comic is kind of like Wonder Woman has these two stories going on with her. She has, do I come from this origin or do I come from that origin? She references being made of clay, which is like her classic origin story. And then her other story is that she got 5 years ago is that she's actually the daughter of Zeus and Apollonia, if I remember her mother's name. And she's like, what is the truth? And one of the coolest parts of this questioning her origin and who she is, she actually uses the lasso of truth on herself to try to get the answers. And she finds out that people have been messing with her actual memories of what the truth is. And people have been kind of questioning this comic because there's a lot of monologuing going on throughout. And I don't mind that. It feels literally a sequel to the previous book that came out a few weeks ago. And I think there's a good moment where once she tries to go find out the truth, there's a full art change. The artists change. And it's kind of this very Greek-looking fantasy, high fantasy stuff. It's the same thing I went in looking to expect. I really enjoyed it. It's really rewarding. What were you thinking?
So that actually reminded me, I just been reading The Wicked Plus the Divine. The recent comic book just came out, and it kind of deals with a similar idea of, like, which origin do I come from? Because a lot of the characters are based on different aspects of mythology, like, or religions. I think one character is based on an Asian god, one's based on, like, a Greek god, one's based on Lucifer, from the Bible. So it's interesting though because there's one god named Terra who they introduced in the latest trade, Commercial Suicide, and she's basically having identity issues because she doesn't know which god she's based off of. Because there's been so much throughout history. There's ones from different countries and cultures. So she's like, she doesn't know. She kind of feels all of them at once. And I just thought it was a really interesting way of going about it because I kind of thought they were all one. All the characters in here were they're based on this one person. So it was interesting to see a god, quote unquote, having kind of an identity crisis. So other than that, I mean, the book has been great. It just reminded me of that Wonder Woman because it's kind of like a similar issue.
That is. This feels appropriate, especially considering that Wonder Woman's kind of perceived as a god, sort of.
Right, exactly. The other thing, though, about the book is I was kind of hoping that it would answer some questions left in previous chapters, and it kind of did, but kind of didn't. I feel like it didn't move the plot forward as much as I would have liked it to. But overall, it's pretty good.
Was it a singular issue or a full trade?
it was a full trade. That's why I was really hoping to like dive into, because the second trade left off at like a huge like change. So I was like, all right, like the third book's really gonna like rev up, and it's kind of just doing more setup. So I was kind of disappointed about that, especially since I've been waiting like months for this book because I pre-ordered it a while ago, but I pre-ordered it with something else that just came out, so they came together. And but I finished it all in one setting, so obviously it got my interest, but it was just I was expecting a little bit more, so I was kind of disappointed.
Were there any kind of panels of interest?
Um, Not that I can think of. I mean, there was like a cool transformation scene that kind of reminded me of Sailor Moon, but um, other than that, no. It's funny because a lot of people talk about how the artwork in this book is so beautiful, and I do kind of agree, but I also kind of disagree. Like certain panels, like the character Tara in this book, like all of her scenes are just gorgeous to me. One thing though that was interesting, so the other issue with Tara is she's um, kind, so she kind of figured out that she was a god. All the gods in this book figure out that they're a god like halfway through their life, and essentially the story is that once you figure out you're gonna die in 2 years. In 2 years. So, but she kind of struggles. Like the gods are kind of giving like all these powers where they can like influence people and like inspire people. Like their singing voices are amazing and everything they do is amazing. But um, she kind of wants to like still hold on to like that little pieces of her that's just her and not the god. So she'll perform these songs that like she actually wrote before she became a god, but like she always gets booed. So that's just interesting. So one of the pages shows tweets that she gets, and they're just so realistic and scary, and like man, like people actually write like this. And I'm kind of curious how the writer came up with them. I mean, maybe they're very simple, but it was very just like super authentic and like I don't know. Yeah, there we go. Just like rape threats and like um, just a lot of people being creepy in general. Um, yeah. So it's been interesting. I guess that's why they called it commercial suicide. Now that I think about it, the name of the third trade. But yeah.
It seems like you and I have been in a comic mode. I've been
Mm-hmm.
reading the Wonder Woman Rebirth. You've been reading the Divine and the Wicked trade.
The Wicked
And
plus the Divine. Sorry.
ah,
One day.
so close.
So close.
But we've also indulged in like the biggest superhero movie officially now because it just dethroned Deadpool recently.
Oh, I didn't know that. So of course we're talking about Civil War. In case you were thinking it was Batman versus Superman.
We won't do that on another podcast anytime soon.
Probably, maybe. Didn't we do that on our last?
We did. That's why we won't do it again anytime soon.
Oh, right. That makes a lot of sense. So we did it on our last podcast. If you want to hear about it, our thoughts on that. But for today, we'll be talking about Civil War. So, what did you think about it?
I loved it. I really. I went back. I saw it twice, and I went back the second time. I was like, okay, I'm gonna recognize the faults and be able to really properly assess this film. And there's only like two major faults, and they're kind of big, but what we get is so important. But I'm not. I almost don't care. It's as if, remember how in the last podcast I talked about if we had gotten the proper court case scene,
Oh, right.
I would have forgiven almost all the sins in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Marvel gave me enough of those types of scenes and thoughts where I almost don't care that the entire part of the action scenes for the first third of the movie really were just not that interesting to look at. That there's like no directing flair to the first part of the action. Like the best part of the so very clear there are going to be some spoilers in this film.
This podcast, but yes, absolutely. Definitely spoiler alert. We'll mark it for when we're done talking about this if you somehow have not seen this movie yet.
But the opening scene where they're in Lagos, Nigeria, that entire fight scene is really not that interesting to look at. The best part of that fight scene is what when what is her name?
Scarlet Witch?
Scarlet where Scarlet Witch throws Steve Rogers to the second floor balcony. Like that was just a cool thing to look at. When you're talking about the actual choreography and so forth, the only thing they had going is that each of the hits felt very tangible. Like every time I did look at it, I'm like, and they find a good way to kind of get the effects to evoke that feeling. But when you talk about like what we actually saw, until we get to the chase scene.
Oh, right, of the guy with the bomb. I forgot his name. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So until we get there, where that when they chase Bucky and they do the whole highway. Well, I don't know if it's a highway, but the entire like Black Panthers in the back of a car jumping and lunging.
Oh, we're talking about chasing Bucky. I thought this was in the beginning. Okay.
Yeah, no. In the beginning, I didn't really care for what I saw. Like it was cool, but I didn't care about how it was portrayed. I felt by the time they got to that scene where when they came for Bucky, I was like, okay, now you guys are gonna step up how you're portraying this. But that's my issue. That's it. Especially when you look at where Tony and Captain America end up at the end of this film, and you pay attention to where they started. This movie's it's brilliant in terms of where it ended up. But what did you think?
So it's funny that you mentioned the courtroom scene because I didn't realize how similar it was until Batman vs. Superman. So you said that because they both kind of had to stand trial, the superheroes, and they both blow up. But I think the only difference is that they actually had the trial in Civil War.
But in that sense.
Which is one of the reasons why he said that you would have liked it better in Batman vs. Superman, which I totally agree. And, well, I guess both of them kind of made the situations worse. But I feel more so that in Civil War it really impacted, like, a lot of things. Like, obviously, Black Panther's dad dies, and it kind of, like, reinforces this idea that superheroes are dangerous, and, like, all right, we really need to nip this in the bud, because this one attempt at peace just got, like, blown away. With Superman, it was kind of like, oh, it got blown up. He'll disappear for a while and come back and save the day, and we'll just forgive him. Or, spoiler alert, he dies.
He partially dies.
He partially dies, right? Yeah, exactly. Another spoiler. But other than that, that little comparison, I also loved the movie. I thought it was amazing. Two things that stuck out to me the most. Number one was just how, like, those scenes where you see all the characters, like, lined up against each other. I think Marvel did such a good job of having, like, building up each character so that I can look at each individual character, even though there's, like, 13 on screen, and be like, I know each of these stories, or, like, I at least know something about each of them. Even, like, Black Panther, who was just introduced in that movie, even if you never knew anything about Black Panther before, it still felt like I know his story. Like, I know why he's here. I know what he's doing. Like, everyone felt very fleshed out. And I think that's super, like, impressive to be able to do.
Right.
I love that aspect of it. Because he just felt so, like, full. Like, man, like, this really is a war. Like, man, these are, like, really, like all these people. Like, and this, I don't know, they built up each character. And it was just a cool thing to, like, experience. And, like, underneath that, I thought it was cool that they had 3 different Black characters. Something that's not really seen. You have your Falcon, who's, like, with Captain America, kind of just, like, the cool Black dude, like, maybe, like, African American. born in DC or something. And then you have your Black Panther who's overseas, international perspective, and then your War Machine who's probably like a little more affluent, hanging out with like Iron Man and whatnot, who's probably like a little more rich and whatnot. Um, but so that was just a cool thing, another cool thing to see. And the third thing, even though I said two, there's three. The argument on each side. It's like before I went in, I was staunchly like Team Captain America. But I went in and I was like, I could see both sides. I'm still Team Cap, but I felt like they really fleshed out both arguments for like why someone would be for this and why someone would be against it. And that was really cool. Just like this kind of turmoil and like it's a real political argument that I feel like we could have in real life. That could be like I could write a paper on it.
No, and what I like is that if you take Captain America and Tony Stark literally at the beginning of each of their films, they would be on opposite sides of this.
That's true.
And that's what I thought was amazing is that we have Steve Rogers can only say no to the government based on the actions of what happened in Winter Soldier, where he can't trust Hydra anymore. I mean,
right.
he can't trust Shield anymore, and
Shield,
and that's been building up since day one. When he met in the Avengers, if you remember, one of the first interactions between Tony and Steve was essentially Tony was like, "You're pretty much just a Boy Scout. You really have to really consider what Shield may be doing for their own purposes." And Steve was like, "Nah. They got our heart. They got our hearts. They care about the right things." And then essentially, at the end of Winter Soldier, we have a Steve Rogers that says like, "Forget the government. Forget systematic portrayals of things. Like the one thing that he could trust, if there's one thing that he would feel like he could trust being away from the past, is Shield, and he doesn't have it anymore. So therefore, he can't look at this governmental deal and say, you know what, I'm going to trust again. In fact, it's Tony's fault that he can't trust again. If you really think about it. Like, he showed him the holes, and then the entire Winter Soldier, even though Tony's not in that movie, is exposing those holes.
Right.
And then Tony can only become where he's at because of his kind of redemptive arc throughout the series. Avengers focuses on him becoming less selfish. And then you talk about Avengers 2 where he has this premonition of something going bad, so he wants to take this proaction. And then the lady in this film is pulling on his heart again. Like, it's always pulling himself out of himself. And in a certain way, he knows the holes in the government. Like, he's the one who exposed it. So he's like, I'm going to take the responsibility needed to do something like this. Because ultimately, that's part, as much as Cap doesn't say it, part of it is like he would not know how, as good of a leader he is, he would not know how to deal with bureaucracy.
I'd agree with you. Also, I wanted to note that I could definitely see how he could change because his first meeting with Shield started with deception because they had him in this room pretending that it was like still 1942. So like already start off from like this mistrust angle. So that's definitely been building up for a while. I don't know if they did that on purpose, but it's definitely a nice starting point to think of, like this mistrust starting, you know?
Right. That's a good point. I didn't even think of it. You're right. That's exactly what. So I mean,
revelations in the podcast.
Right. So I mean, that's like to me. I think someone had asked me if they can watch this movie without having watched the rest of the Avengers movies or any other comic book hero movie. I can't say yes anymore. Like I really, this is what it feels like to be a comic reader. Just even like this year I've been kind of getting more interested in comics. It's like things that previously existed change status quos about how people view the world, and that's going to inform it going forward. Like, it feels so much like a comic of like, well, if you didn't pay attention to that piece of history or that previous issue, you're going to be wondering what we're talking about over here.
All right. Yeah, I think I read a list of, it was like movies you can skip if you want to watch this movie. And really, it only took out, I think, the Thor movies and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh,
And Incredible Hulk, right. And I was just like, that still leaves you like 13 movies, which is like a lot of homework to do. It's really crazy. I think they left out Iron Man 2? Or
which
Iron...
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Or Iron Man 3, I don't remember. But, yeah, it's just really funny because I'm like, thanks.
Yeah, it's not, and literally the only movies you can miss are the movies that don't have the characters in the movie. Like you can
Basically.
skip Thor and Hulk because they're not in it.
Basically, yeah, exactly.
But, just going back to your other argument, because that reminded me of the next thing we want to talk about is, just like how comic books are why can't I say that word today? Influencing us. And just
Yeah.
like, us getting more into comic books this year, you and me both, I've definitely picked up more comic books in the past year and probably my entire life. At least myself. Because I mean, I've looked at my brother's comic books, but like me actually going out and like being proactive about what I want to buy and what I want to do and what I want to read has increased in the past year. So it kind of helps now that Comixology is kind of helping us out with that in our pockets.
Oh, so much.
Yeah. So, well, I was gonna say if anyone doesn't know, Comixology posted it's a monthly membership you can sign up for. I think it's $5.99 a month, maybe
Yeah.
cheaper. You basically have unlimited access to a bunch of comic books, a bunch of new comic books, and it just seems like it might be kind of awesome. Except there is one downside.
There
There are
is
two.
no.
But
Huh?
there are two
Sorry, say-
downsides. But go ahead.
There are two downsides. Well, my biggest downside is there is no Marvel and DC comics, which not too bad for me because I mostly read Image comics, which is Wicked Plus the Divine, Saga, East to West a little bit, some few other ones. But I do want to get into like there's a bunch of Marvel comics that I do want to read. I want to read Black Panther. I want to read Kamala Khan, and a few others. So that's kind of an issue for me. What's your other biggest?
My other issue is that if we're gonna do independent comics, which is what their game plan is, which is great, they are only giving you the beginning of runs. So you can read, and they also give you manga, which is cool. So you can read the first volume or first two volumes of Attack on Titan. You can read the first two volumes of Vinland. You can read the first volume of Saga. You can read the first volume of Hellboy. But it's only the first volume or so. They still want you to purchase, which is great because ultimately they care about the indie guys, so they want you to invest back into them. But
Right.
it is still sad because, like, what happens after you spend that one night binging one comic? And you're like, crap, do I have to spend money? Eventually. But this leads me to the other thing about Comixology. So we talked about Comixology as kind of a subscription service, but you don't have to do that. You and I have been paying attention, well, more so me recently, and I've been just telling you when it happens. Is
Very nice. Yeah.
which is what sales that they do. They've been doing, Comixology has been doing amazing sales this year. There was a buy one get one half off, or buy one get one free for equal price or less, which you and I pretty much turned into getting a full volume of Cloak and Dagger and two comics of
Blue Marvel and something else.
and Power
Oh yeah, Iron Man and Power
Power-
Fist. Power Fist Iron. Power Man and Iron Fist. Is that right?
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, that is right.
And we were able to finesse all of that by barely spending what, $15, right?
I think it was less than that. I think we spent like 10.
Right, and then you talk about when Civil War, the movie was coming out, they dropped the comic down to $8. When
Which was also great. So that was like $1 each issue, about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So essentially, they make a lot of great incentives, and I've decided what I'm going to do is that I prefer collecting trades personally. That's what I want to do.
Same.
So for the most part, I want to do random issues. So like when DC Rebirth came out, or even the Wonder Woman Rebirth, I wanted to read those and get a glimpse of those, and then I'll wait for trades. And so now I can just do a dabble a comic here, a dabble a comic here without and then I can do some crazy stuff. Like I bought Infinite Crisis physical copy, and then there's a one shot that was sold for $1 back in like 2004 that leads up to Infinite Crisis, and they're selling it. They're giving it away for free on Comixology.
Oh.
Like if I were to actually try to get the hard copy of that, I would have to put in work.
Right. Yeah, a lot of work.
Right. So it's like, and for single issues, that's way more work than I want. So it's like,
Yeah.
so for me now, it feels like, oh, I can read a big event and then say, okay, I don't know why this character is here or why that character is there. So I can now read 2 issues around that character. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that leads to that leads to that. And then it makes, but now I don't need to make the investment of hunting down a trade just to read that one issue. It's really, yeah, it feels like it's going to fill a gap in my comic reading setup.
I agree. Yeah, I think I'm going to hold off on Comixology for now until they kind of flesh out what exactly they want to do and I can kind of see what model they're going after and
Right.
hopefully see like, okay, like they only have like a lot of older, like the first issues. Like, are they going to keep updating it to like as you go
Right.
along? Because if that's the case, then I would be willing to invest. But
Right,
if
that's
it's, yeah.
like a potential good model is that for the first 2 months you have access to first ones and then second ones and third ones.
Yeah, and it continuously add. And maybe even like after a year you start taking off like the beginning ones or something.
Right.
Or you keep it. I don't know. But that would definitely keep me going. But that's also if they add Marvel stuff. DC, so not so much. I don't think I would read a lot of DC stuff in general, so
You don't think so?
I don't. Like even the things I was listing earlier, I noticed they were all Marvel, so I'm like, maybe I don't really even need DC.
You don't. Maybe you should just do Marvel Unlimited down the line.
Marvel and Image, that's all I read.
Right, so you should...
Oh, Marvel Unlimited, I see. How much is that a month?
That's pretty much Netflix, $10.
I'm not doing that. Although I probably should, because I guess I probably spend about $10 on comics.
The only thing that I will say that they do, which again makes sense, is that they're always about 6 months behind, which is not terrible because if you sit down and think about it, if you do trades, which you do, I know you
do.
It works out because trades usually come out like 3-4 months afterwards, so you're not waiting for the trade very long.
But then I'd rather just wait for the trade and buy it for $10 instead of spending monthly fees.
But you'd get more. Like for me, that like depending if you ever get to the point where you're like, I want to read this, and this. Like once you start listing out, like today I sat down and tried to list out what I want to read, and there's so much. I'm like, all right, I'm sticking to 5. That's my goal for the year. I'm not reading more than 5 comic books going on at the same time. It'll be Black Panther, Squadron Supreme, The Ultimates, the new Wonder Woman, and All-Star Batman. That's my goal. I don't want to do more than that. I'll fill in with random trades or random stuff in Comixology, but those are my goals. But if you ever get to the point where you start adding more to your list, then that's what you look at Marvel Unlimited for, I think.
I feel like I should do that because I am very like, maybe I should read this, maybe I should read that. I feel like that's a good goal to have, like 5 comics and keep up with those religiously. Because even like Black Panther, I haven't got the second one yet. I really need to, but yeah. But anywho, that was pretty long. I guess we switch gears a lot. We were talking about comics a lot. This podcast is also about hip hop.
You almost think that we don't listen to hip hop anymore.
Almost. I mean, it's getting harder to come up with stuff. But anyway, what was your week in hip hop like?
So, over the last few months, I've been listening to a lot of Elzhi's Lead Poison album, which has been relatively incredible. And 2 highlights from that project that I'll talk about is there's a song called 216s, and he talks about that he wrote the song 216s because a lot of his fans just say, give us 2 crazy verses and that's all we want. We don't need anything else. We just want like crazy metaphors and similes and so forth. And Elzhi is a technician in terms of that when you listen to him, it's almost like a computer wrote it in terms of how deliberate and intentional his lines are. It's very, I think I put him in the same level of like Black Thought, where he's like, man, that's so detailed and thought oriented. He's a machine almost.
Mm-hmm.
And so people just love for him to rap generically sometimes. And this song 216, he instead says like, I'm not going to just give you two verses. I'm going to give you like two kind of heartbreaking stories around 16-year-olds. So the first verse has him doing the story about a 16-year-old father dying 16 hours before his daughter is born.
Oh, wow.
And then the second verse responds to that first verse, where essentially you find out that the mother, because of things in the song, because the mother ends up being the person who set out the hit on the father, but she gets jailed as she's giving birth. Essentially, she gets arrested, and so he really just kind of tugs at your emotions through that song.
It sounds like some Immortal Technique type of stuff.
I wouldn't put it on in that case because it's not as like depressing. Like, it's somber and it's sad, but it's not depressing.
Okay.
And then, so like that's what we come to expect from Elzhi. And then he has this other song called Hello, where he's literally describing being trapped in a song. Like, the song that you're listening to, the person speaking to you is trapped there. Really clever idea. And there are times where he guilt trips you for skipping the song. Part of his verse is like, he ends one of his verses like, I hope you're nodding in agreement instead of nodding to the track.
Huh. So he like breaks the fourth wall a bit. That's interesting.
Breaks the fourth wall entirely.
Yeah.
There are lines where he's like, he plays around in the second verse talking about like, I tripped over a pair of chords. Like, he's trying to describe how he got trapped in the song, and as soon as like, I tripped into a pair of chords, you hear a pair of chords play in the background, or I put on these kicks, where he's supposed to be referencing shoes, but there's a certain kick that goes on in the song. And it's like, it's very meticulous. It's very crazy. So yeah, that's been the big highlight for me.
That's interesting. Just that reminds me real quick of there's a Rakim song, "What's on Your Mind," and I kind of had a similar experience where he has this line. It's something like "come through your ear like headphones," and I remember having headphones on when I heard it, and I was like, "Whoa, how did he know?" You know. So that was pretty dope. Also, Elzhi's Lead Poison sounds like an anime. When he first said it, I was like, "We're talking about hip hop now. What are you talking about?"
You look at the cover, it's a cloud with raining pencils on him, and a lot of this album was written with him kind of being in a depressed state. And part of what he ended up kind of calling it lead poison is that, you know how...
Oh, like pencils. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right, exactly. Part of it is the lead pencils and knowing that sometimes the thing that's poisoning you is also the cure. So the lead is also the thing that's been binding him because of like writer's block and so forth, is also the thing that kind of frees him because that's where you find the serums to heal you.
So it doesn't sound like an anime anymore, because anime titles are usually a lot more ambiguous. But anyhow,
and we kind of have a weird mutuals. You and I have not listened to as much projects in full recently.
No, we have not.
I think the life of a hip-hop writer, blogger has gotten to let you listen to a lot of stuff I probably will never listen to in my own free will.
Most likely.
My heart goes out for you.
It hasn't been that bad. It hasn't been that bad. I'll say that.
Right, and thankfully, you don't have to talk about any of the bad stuff.
Thankfully.
But before we get to that, you were talking to one of the songs I did get to skim, but you and I skimmed was, well, you listened to more of the project than I did, was the Chance coloring book.
Right. Chance coloring book, yeah. Not Chance 3 anymore, but Chance coloring book.
I mean, the hat still says 3 if you want to buy them.
This is true. And there's also an actual coloring book now, based
Oh,
on the
I did not know that.
mixtape. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So the song, I'll just go over one song that really stuck out to me was All We Got, which is the first song off of the album. And I think what stuck out to me, I heard a lot about this album before I listened to it, so I guess it definitely influenced me, but in a weird way because I heard No Problem before I listened to the album, or the mixtape slash mixtape. And that song sounded to me very like, it sounded good, but it wasn't like the most amazing thing. So when I heard like all this like high praise of the mixtape, I'm like, man, this must be really good. And then one of my really good friends, or one of my one of my friends, also praised it. And he's like very Christian, and he called it a gospel album. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I kind of came in with this like weird perspective, like, all right, I've heard like this one song where he's like threatening to like show up in like a music studio's lobby and like with some like I guess to clearly hurt somebody, and then this other someone else telling me that this is like a gospel album. So when I heard it, I think in the end, what I told you earlier, it's like if Kanye was still old Kanye and he made the life of Pablo. And it's like kind of like I think what Kanye was trying to do with the life of Pablo. And All We Got kind of like showed me that like right away, like, oh, that's what it is. That's why everyone's saying this. It was very like inspirational and just like nice.
Yeah.
I think there's one thing about that project. It's one thing about Chance, but this project, and I haven't listened to it properly in full, but it always seems to be the thing about him is that it's happy. Like, and it's not a cynical happy. It's not like there's something to be said for like I think that's part of the reason why people are willing to give it that gospel title even quicker is that a lot of our music is steeped in like cynicism or steeped in like I'm better than you, and not even just like oh I'm being a backpacker, but it's like even the backpacker guys I love, like
Right. Very boastful and
right. So it's not that, but there's this kind of like joy.
That's true. That
And
is very true.
this is weird. It's like it's not like an innocent joy, but it's like a pure joy. I think that's kind of what I'm going in. What I think is important about Chance's music, and part of the reason why people I think are willing to get into that. In fact, one of the things I wanted to point about the gospel thing is that an artist I know, Taylor Gray, had pointed out is that although Christians may not call it gospel because there are questions about like theological questions. The thing that you point out is true. Is like, what is the tone of the music? What are people kind of walking away from?
It's true. I read somebody, one of my friends was posting how like we need to start watching what we listen to because a lot of stuff kind of like puts negative kind of like vibes in our mind, I guess. And yeah, like you said, like Chance coloring book is very just like joyful. Yeah, that's true. Well, how about said you listen to a bit of the Dream Junkies album.
Yes. So one thing that we do get to listen to, even when you were here, was the Dream Junkies album, and the song that kind of stood out from that project to me is a song called Secondhand Smoke. And for those who don't know, Dream Junkies is a group of Ruslan, Belief, and John Gives. And the song Secondhand Smoke is actually a solo track by Belief, but he's talking about John Gives. And one of the Christian fan community can be weird. And one of the weird things that they were dealing with is that John smokes like cigarettes a lot. Like
Mm.
it's in some of his promo material and so forth, and he know and people feel a couple of the fan base feels weird about that. And it was interesting to listen to a song kind of dealing with it, but kind of not from Belief.
Mm.
But more importantly, like and feels like I don't know the last time I heard a song like this where he's kind of dealing with the fact that John doesn't want him around. But like when John is smoking, essentially he's like, you don't need to really be around me. It's like, and Belief is like, yeah, I will be. Like I'm around. I'm here to support you. I'm with you, even in the things that you feel like you need to be alone with. And it's throughout this album, there's a whole kind of relationship between those two that seem to stand out, especially because John is the star of the group now. He's the most recent added to the group, and on a solo level, he's the biggest of the three. And Believe kind of deals with the fact that on a different song, whereas like people ask for John more than they ask for him or Ruslan.
Mm.
And it's been interesting because he's the old. I don't know how old Ruslan is in relation to everybody, but like Belief acts like an older brother. His wife is John's sister. So it's just been interesting to kind of him talk about the relationship and just being there with people in different moments. And he's like, there's a part in the song where I think he was like, "Do you need to put it out?" I was like, "Don't worry about it. I'm here at your side." I'm like, it really literally felt like a ride or die song. But I
Mm.
can't, and I think it's different in the sense of that I don't think we get ride or die songs about the person being ride or die for somebody else in that sense. Like I think people that's a concept that we have in music, but we usually talk like I need me a ride or die chick or I need people who are loyal. But when do we get songs about that person rapping being the loyal person or being the ride or die or what it means to live life with people like that?
That's true. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like songs I've heard that deal with that, and I don't think I really can think of anything like that. Kind of like you kind of have like this like no new friends and these chicks ain't loyal, but you don't really have like I'm here for you.
Right. Or I'm going to be loyal to you.
Right. That's interesting. Unless it's like a romantic way, and that's usually R&B, but never really in hip hop. So that's very interesting. Uh, huh. Definitely have to link to that song. But for yeah, I didn't have that experience with mines, no relations on my part. Although I did decide that I want to convert the music on my phone because, like as we said, like we kind of haven't really had a chance to listen to full projects lately, and I kind of want to change that. So my goal is to basically redo my entire phone. And I guess you guys will see how it goes by the next podcast. And my original thing was just to have black women because it's mostly what I listen to. I noticed, Beyonce, Rihanna. I am just starting to get into Jackie Hill Perry. Uh, who else am I listening to? Rhapsody, Leon LaHavish, just a bunch of different artists. But of course, I have to expand it because there's a lot of other artists I like. But I do want to just go to full albums or full mixtapes now, without any singles. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm pretty excited about it. It's gonna make my phone look really clean and pretty. So yeah. But other than that, I did get to check out a really cool artist by the name of Cheech Bundy that I mostly just want to give him a small shout out. He was the opener for a concert I went to on Saturday by the Korean R&B singer Dean, and just from the first verse I heard from him, I was like, "This guy is dope." And I wasn't sure like which level he was on because I've never heard of him before, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's like big or not. But the last song he did, he said it was an Ill Mind produced song, so I was like, all right, he's clearly like somewhat established, so this is dope. It's called This Is For. And I don't know, it's just like really smooth and dope and just very like backpackery, but I can see him going places. I can see him like getting on the radio, so I'm hoping that he continues to climb up.
Do you know where he's from?
I think he's from New York. I'm pretty sure he's from New York. Cheech Bundy. Let me
I
double check.
wonder if that informed, if you think that he was able to tell where he's from by his style, or maybe not.
I would say New York from his style, but if I'm thinking correctly, I remember him saying he was from the Bronx.
Okay.
So, I think that was, yeah.
On a total side note, let me just remind you, Bronx is a borough. There are certain boroughs that get claimed to be boroughs that are not boroughs in New York City when people go out to these concerts. Just want to...
Really?
We had the Harlem discussion.
Oh, right, we did. Well, I mean, Harlem should be its own borough, really. But, because it's just so, like, its own space and attitude, and, like, you can just tell when someone's from Harlem, so I don't know.
I know, but
yeah.
going to events and hearing New Yorkers, like, ignore the rest of Manhattan and Staten Island and just treat Harlem as its borough that represents those places is quite erroneous.
I guess. But, I mean, it is a form of celebration, though, of different boroughs and representation and, you know, what's it called? Yeah, people just want to represent.
I get you. I'm just...
Yeah.
But, so let's talk... That's our theme for this week. Our amazing co-host got some gray hair recently.
I did?
Yes, because it was your birthday recently.
It was my birthday recently. I am 25 years young.
25 years old.
Boo.
So we thought we'd talk a little bit about celebrations and kind of think about, like, either celebratory moments or ways people celebrate in nerddom and hip-hopdom.
Right.
And except?
No, I was like, so
Oh.
So what was yours? What did you think of?
For me in nerddom, keeping this whole comic themes, this is going to be like a half comic theme podcast. Doing the DC Rebirth and them trying to kind of repiece history and make sense of all of it is their celebration. Like, the two events that I finally read, Infinite Crisis and Rebirth, all deals with legacy and in different ways. So, for those who don't know, very short version of Infinite Crisis because there's way too much to unpack. We'll do it very shortly. In 1985, DC did a...
This is a lot to unpack.
Yes.
Can you start from 1985?
In 1985, DC did this event called Crisis of Infinite Earths. Before then, there were multiple universes, and then they put all the universes in one. And certain characters died and no longer existed. So there was a version of Superman that no longer existed, a version of Lex Luthor, a version of Lois Lane, and a version of Superboy. That all got kind of ended up in heaven-ish. There's a proper term, but essentially it's heaven, and everybody else kind of died. And then for the last 25 years, it's been, we know the Superman and Batman that we know of. That's what's been after Crisis. Infinite Crisis, which is like the 20th anniversary of it, actually, decided to bring these characters back that were quote-unquote in heaven. And they're watching over the DC universe. And they're looking at the ways that this universe was changing and dealing with, and feeling very kind of sad about where the state of affairs of comics, essentially. And the entire comic kind of has DC characters of the present dealing with their legacies and dealing with where the state of comics is going, but it's almost very celebratory of appreciating all these different characters, because even forgetting like the time travel stuff going on is like almost every DC character is in this book. Characters I've never heard of before, characters I've had to do analysis of, like everyone's there, and it's really a celebration of who they are, where they've come, and where they're going. And DC Rebirth does the same. I talked a little bit about they rebooted the entire universe again in 2011. Rebirth seeks to bring back things before 2011, where, spoilers, the Flash that technically died in 2011 came back and met the Flash of now And
Okay.
essentially, he talks about that in DC universe, 10 years have been stolen from them. So that's why everyone started over.
Hmm.
And now that he's back in the universe, the potential to remember things of before is now possible again. So like when I talked about the Wonder Woman comic, it was like although they're going to be rebranding and trying to figure out where does she go, it is kind of a celebration of the histories and stories that have been told about these characters, and I love that.
It sounds like a really good introductory way to get into comic books.
It's a great like if you were, I would say that whenever you get to visit me, you should read that issue and read one of the other Rebirth issues. I think you'd appreciate
Yeah, the
that.
physicals.
No, I have a digital comicsology.
So you want to send it? We'll talk about that later. Anyway, so wait, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I want to hear what you have to say so we can get out of the comics world for a change.
We are getting out of the comics world. We're going into anime world for a bit, a small bit. Um, so my immediate idea for celebration was Gurren Lagann. Um, I think Gurren Lagann is kind of like a anime that's full of a bunch of small wins. It's like, again, spoiler alert. Um, you have them, oh gosh, Simon figuring out how to use his drill, and then, you know, I think they had to break out of jail at some point, and then them like digging a hole outside, and then having to defeat. Like it's just like a constant like opposition win, opposition win. Um, and I think the coolest thing about Gurren Lagann is, and I've heard people have mixed feelings about it, is the end where it's just so like it's just like a sigh of relief where it's like it's all over. Like we can just like sit and rest and be happy and just like chill. I think it's one of the best
Except,
anime endings I've ever seen.
I said everyone can rest and chill except for Simone.
I feel like he's the biggest example of that. Like he's just like, well, I mean, he's not gonna like fully rest because what Nina died
Right.
or evaporated, but he's definitely like I don't want to say at peace, but he's like chill. Um, yeah, because
I
he's
mean,
just like,
trapped in the desert in a cloak, away from friends. I'm not sure how
is
much
it bad
chill
that I
that.
kind of feel that that's kind of nice and calming? Am I that antisocial?
I guess you might be. I, I would also like to add that that ending is so divisive. But I have a friend of mine, like besides all the deaths that have been going on, that ending specifically has destroyed a mutual friend of ours. Shout out to Control Freak. He hates the show. Half of the reason is particularly because of how Simone ends.
I mean, I love a good love story, and I love when like the characters get together in the end. But it's one of the few times where it didn't bother me that much, and I think it's one of the few anime endings that like it wasn't open ended, and it was just like it felt very like it brought everything together. So yeah, I thought that was a cool celebratory ending that I could enjoy.
But what about in hip hop? Didn't you go to an event that was kind of celebratory recently?
I did, and it's funny when you were talking about DC Rebirth kind of being a um, reunion of a sorts. It kind of reminded me of Summer Jam because their first artist that came on stage, even though it started really late and they made me throw away my umbrella, was Good Music. And obviously, like it was an interesting day because like there was a thunderstorm that was supposed to happen. Governor's Ball got canceled, which means Kanye's show got canceled, which was he was headlining Governor's Ball. But I knew Good Music was performing at Summer Jam, so I was already expecting a Kanye appearance. But just because it happened that way, it kind of felt that much more special. I felt bad for the Governor's Ball people though, but it just felt like obviously he was probably ready to do a show. He was like geared for this, for him to like kind of release that and like anticipation or like whatever like build up he had to like do something. we kind of got it at Summer Jam. And it was just really cool to see. Like, it's cool. It would have been cool to see Kanye by himself do a show, but it was just cool to see him with, like, all of good music as well. Like, where you have, like, Big Sean, Pusha T, Kanye, and the new designer with an extra eye for no reason on stage together. Just kind of like generations, as well as just like a cool mix of people, and all just like kind of seeming like very familiar with each other and like family. Just like felt like very, like we mentioned earlier with Chance, like super joyful. Just happy to be like on stage. Like even when one person was doing like a song that's their song, like the other three kind of like stood back and kind of like rev them up. And even like Designer, he closed out the show with Panda, which is pretty big. So yeah, so it's just like really nice to see like rappers getting together. You know, we always love Kanye smiling. We don't like Kanye scowling. And everyone just kind of like revving each other up, being there for each other, like a brotherhood on stage. It was kind of like what it was seeing. How about you?
I kind of need that. I guess we're both going to talk about good music and celebrations a little bit, because my choice is Common, and particularly a song called "Celebrate" off of the "Dreamer of a Believer" album. I don't the song is interesting in the sense of that the original song was sampled is, I think it's Kenny Loggins, if I'm right. It should be Kenny Loggins, and it talks about a soldier coming home. And then Common flips it where someone, I think, coming home from jail. And mind you, this is not really Common at his best, but it's Common
Common really hasn't been on his best in a while.
That's actually a full podcast on its own, waiting to happen.
Yes.
But there's something like really joyful about the way that he wants to celebrate there. And it's not, as I say, it's not even deep, it's not esoteric, it's really just basic of like, we're glad to have you around. And it's very, I guess in that sense, it's very small scale celebration compared to everything else that we've dealt with so far. It's like, we're just glad to have you celebrate as if you're not in jail. I can't remember if the person came out of jail or they're celebrating as if he's not in jail. I think he's coming back out of jail, if I remember correctly.
So I'm feeling we should change our podcast name to Good Music and Comic Books.
I would like to apologize on behalf of myself and Victoria. That comic books came into this podcast. The original goal of this podcast was not actually to talk about comics. It's supposed to talk about Japanese stuff, influenced media of nerddom at one point in time. But yeah.
I think we were always including comic books, though.
I think we were, but I never expected a full podcast like this.
That's true. That is very true. I was expecting more manga and anime. It's funny how comic books kind of took over.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Anyway, that brings us to our what question of the week, or the podcast. And our what question is, what things have left you with the most satisfaction?
Right. We've talked about celebration so much today, and we've talked about kind of honoring legacy and so forth. It's like, what are the things that in nerddom or hip-hop done, both in our case, that's kind of left like when you finished it and you're like, I feel really good. And my answer is Tatami Galaxy. I'll never forget being in Jamaica. I think it's fall 2011. December 2011, December 2010 in Jamaica, watching Tatami Galaxy. Coming back January 2011, and what feels like my life entirely changed in 2011 from watching the show. I've never walked away from a piece of medium, besides maybe College Dropout, really feeling like, oh my gosh, everything almost changes.
How did it change for you?
So, essentially, Tatami Galaxy, not even going to do a plot synopsis. The point is that the character goes through this point of questioning what's his purpose in college, and feeling that if he were to rewind time and join a different social group or somewhere, he would have his dream college life. And essentially, he comes to the realization, A, you can't do that, but B, of like, you have what you have now to make use of it. And now, almost technically, now is your dream college life to a certain extent. And I think for me, it made me reconsider how I looked at myself in college. Like, if people know me from CCNY, there's a point in time where I was just like, am I really making use of this time period? Like, am I really enjoying myself? And I think in 2011, a lot of things changed for me. I mean, that was the year I ended the first in a relationship. I bounced back from a tough sophomore year in terms of grades. Like, a lot of things kind of just like opened up in front of me, but I never would have considered, and people I interacted with, and it was just really like Marcus Wolf became social-ish, and it's just really reconsidering how I looked at that going into my senior year.
Hmm. Well, mine feels a lot less important now.
But it's what made you feel satisfied. Like, watching that is like, I was able to take action because of how I felt at the end.
Right. So mine is a Korean drama by the name of Healer. If anyone watches Korean dramas, they're similar to animes where they typically leave very open-ended, kind of a little bit taste of dissatisfaction there, where they're kind of like they left so many things like unanswered and it kind of seems abrupt. But Healer was one of the few dramas that I watched where the ending was just kind of like the same thing I was saying before. Like, it just kind of like brought everything together. It just felt like very like complete picture. So I think that's the thing with me with Korean dramas, because sometimes there is dramas that are so good and you're just watching and you're watching and you're watching. Then you start to get to those last few episodes and you kind of get kind of nervous because it's like, is this going to end well? Are they just going to like cut abruptly? Are they going to start some new storyline out of nowhere that they're not going like they're going to have to rush to solve in 2 episodes? But Healer just was like paced really well. It was just like a very like easy, not easygoing drama, but just like it was smooth. It was just like everything made sense and it ended just like nicely. So it was a very nice satisfactory feeling. That was it.
And we want to open that up to you guys to answer. You can answer that using, on Twitter, #NerdsOnHipHop.
Or ask NOHH, or you can email us at nerdsonhiphop@gmail.com. Ask us anything.
And for the first time ever, we're finishing barely into an hour. This is a weird ending. But bring it to a close for us before I make it too long again.
Alright.
Well, thanks for listening to Nerds on Hip Hop. Once again, I'm Victoria, aka Sailor Scout, where you can get to know me more personally on social media at Miss Old School. That is Old School with a K.
And I am the Wolves Den 25. You can find me at Wolves Den 25 on Twitter and Instagram, and the Wolves Den on YouTube.
And his government name is Marcus.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. You'll never know. You might know.
Catch you later. Sayonara, son.
Bye!